The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Marcus Bellamy stood motionless in his own driveway, his face unreadable as Officer Kyle Brennan shoved his phone back into his chest, the screen still displaying the property deed with Marcus's name printed clearly at the top. Brennan's smile never faltered. That easy, condescending smile. The smile of a man who enjoyed his work a little too much. What Kyle Brennan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in exactly 72 hours, this man would become his boss. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit subscribe because tomorrow's story will leave you speechless. The morning had started quietly. Too quietly. Marcus Bellamy stood in the driveway of his new home, a modest craftsman-style house on Elmwood Avenue in Riverside, Georgia. The paint was fresh. The lawn was trimmed. The porch had character. He'd bought it sight unseen from Atlanta 43 photos, one virtual tour, and a gut feeling that said, this is it. He wasn't just buying a house. He was coming home. Marcus had left Riverside 26 years ago. Left at 21 with a duffel bag, a one-way ticket to Atlanta, and a silent promise never to look back. He'd built a career in law enforcement, 24 years on the force, rising through the ranks with discipline and integrity. And now, at 47, he was returning. Not as the kid who fled, but as the newly appointed chief of police. The swearing-in was scheduled for Monday morning. Right now, it was Friday, and Marcus wanted to do something simple, something ordinary. He wanted to stand in his driveway with a cup of coffee and just look at his house. The house he earned. The future he built. The September air was cool and golden. A dog barked in the distance. Sprinklers hissed softly 2 doors down. Everything felt right. Then he heard the engine. A black and white patrol car rolled slowly down Elmwood Avenue and stopped directly in front of his property. Marcus didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, thermos in hand, standing on his own land. The driver's door swung open. The officer who stepped out was big, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who walked like he owned every inch of pavement his boots touched. His name tag read Brennan. His eyes were cold and calculating, and he was already smiling before he'd said a single word. That smile made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Morning," Brennan said, stopping at the edge of the driveway. He didn't step onto it. Not yet. "What are we doing out here today?" Marcus met his gaze evenly. "Drinking my coffee." Brennan's smile widened. "Uh-huh. And whose house is this?" "Mine." Brennan tilted his head, slow and theatrical, like Marcus had just told the funniest joke in the world. He looked at the house, then back at Marcus, then at the house again, used like it was evidence. "You've seen my ID," Marcus said quietly. "You've seen the deed." "I've seen a screenshot on a phone," Brennan said, his voice still friendly, still calm. "Could be anything. I can't verify that standing in somebody's driveway." "It's my driveway." Brennan's smile tightened at the corners. "Just slightly. Just enough. Double quotes, sir. I'm going to need you to lower your voice." Marcus hadn't raised his voice. Not even close. His tone had been flat and even the entire time. They both knew it. Every officer on that lawn knew it. The young woman by the second car, she knew it too. Marcus could see it in the way she'd gone very still. Across the street, a door opened. An older white man in a bathrobe stepped onto his porch, arms folded, watching, not with concern, with interest. Like he'd been expecting this. Marcus filed that away. "I'm not raising my voice," Marcus said, quiet and clear. "I'm asking you to step off the property while we verify the situation," Brennan said. His hand moved to his belt. Not to his weapon, but close enough. "That's not a request I'm going to make twice." Everything in Marcus's body told him to stand his ground. 24 years of law enforcement. A career built on knowing what was right. The deed was on his phone. His name was on it. This was his house, his driveway, his land. He stepped back anyway. He stepped back because he'd been black in America for 47 years. He stepped back because there were 4 officers on his lawn and one of them had his hand near his belt. He stepped back because this street was quiet and there were no cameras he could see. He stepped back. And he kept his hands visible. And he kept his face still. Smart, Brennan said. Like it was a compliment. Then he pulled the handcuffs off his belt. The sound they made, that flat metallic click, was very loud in the quiet morning air. Trespassing, Brennan said. Casual as a weather report. Hands behind your back. This is my property. Hands behind your back. The young officer by the second car looked down at the ground. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were pressed flat against her thighs. The posture of someone working very hard not to move. The cuffs closed around Marcus's wrists. Cold metal. His own driveway. The smell of September grass and fresh coffee going cold on the ground where he'd set it down. Across the street. The man on the porch unfolded his arms. The back of a patrol car smelled like stale coffee and cheap disinfectant. Marcus sat with his hands cuffed behind him, his back straight, his eyes forward. The seat was hard plastic molded in a way that wasn't designed for comfort. Brennan drove without talking. One hand on the wheel. The radio murmuring low. Like this was routine. Like the man in his back seat was nothing. Marcus looked out the side window. He knew this route. He'd known it since he was a boy. The barber shop had been a hardware store back then. The gas station had been a vacant lot. But the police department building that had always been exactly where it was. Big and brick and permanent. Like it had grown up out of the Georgia clay and decided it. Wasn't going anywhere. He'd sworn at 21 that he would never walk into that building. He was 47 now. The patrol car turned into the lot. Inside. The precinct was running its normal Friday morning routine. A desk officer typed slowly with 2 fingers. A pair of officers argued about football near the break room. Phones rang. The overhead lights were harsh and white and made everyone look tired. Brennan walked Marcus through the main door like he was carrying in groceries. A few heads turned. Most went back to what they were doing. One officer, young, buzz-cut, sitting near the window, watched a beat too long before looking away. Brennan steered Marcus to the processing area and pushed him into the chair with one hand on his shoulder. Not rough enough to be a shove. Just enough to make the point. Sit tight, Brennan said, and went to the desk. Marcus sat. He looked at the room. Long habit. He couldn't turn it off. The layout. The sightlines. The geography of who sat where and why. A row of filing cabinets along the far wall. One drawer not fully closed. That right? That's right. You got ID on you? Marcus had spent 47 years learning how to keep his voice level in moments that didn't deserve level. His pulse was steady. His hands didn't shake. He reached slowly, deliberately into his back pocket and pulled out his driver's license stub. Brennan took it, glanced at it. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Atlanta? He said it like an accusation. Long way from home. I live here now. Brennan handed the license back without looking at Marcus. He was already reaching for his radio. I'm going to need you to step back from the property, Brennan said, his tone casual, almost friendly. While we sort this out. Marcus didn't move right away. He looked at Brennan, at the certainty on his face, at the way he'd already stopped listening. Not yet, Marcus told himself. Not here. Not like this. He stepped back. 2 more patrol cars turned onto Elmwood Avenue within minutes. Marcus counted them the way he'd been trained. Quick, automatic, emotionless. 2 units. 4 more officers. all for one man standing in a driveway with a coffee thermos. The cars boxed in the front of the property. Doors opened. Officers spread out in a loose semicircle at the edge of the lawn. One of them, a young black woman, maybe late 20s. Her hair pulled back tight, stopped near the second car and didn't advance. She stood still, watching. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes moved over everything. Brennan walked back across the street toward Marcus. Slow, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. "You said this property is yours," Brennan said. "Then you won't mind showing me more than a driver's license." "I have the deed confirmation on my phone," Marcus said. "Let's see it." Marcus unlocked his phone, pulled up the email from his realtor. The signed purchase agreement. His full name. The Elmwood Avenue address printed clearly at the top. He held the screen toward Brennan. Brennan leaned forward, squinted at it, leaned back. He didn't take the phone, didn't touch it, just looked at it long enough to make his point, then looked away. "That's an Atlanta address on your license," he said again. "I just moved, Brennan rocked back on his heels. "See, what happened is we got a call. Says there's someone on this property who doesn't belong here." He gestured vaguely at the whole bulletin board, thick with papers nobody had taken down in months. A water-stained ceiling tile that someone had patched badly. The city seal hung on the wall across from him. An eagle, a shield, a Latin motto underneath. Veritas et Justia. Truth and justice. Marcus looked at it for a long moment. Then he shifted in the chair, feeling the cuffs bite into his wrists, and looked at the seal again. Brennan was at the desk, filling out the citation with deliberate slowness. He chatted with the desk officer about something, laughed, a real laugh, easy and loose. From near the door, Officer Janelle Carter hadn't moved. She'd followed the unit back to the precinct. Now she stood near the entrance with her hat in her hands, turning it in slow circles. She was watching Marcus the way you watch something that doesn't add up. He could feel it. Without looking directly at her. She was young. Smart, probably. Careful, definitely. The way she'd stood on that lawn, hands flat at her sides, jaw set, told him she understood exactly what was happening and exactly how much room she had to do anything about it. Not much. Not yet. Brennan set down his pen and stretched his arms over his head with a groan. "Almost done." He called over. Marcus said nothing. He kept his back straight and his breathing slow and his face completely still. Then the footsteps stopped. Marcus didn't look up right away, but something in the room had shifted, subtle, like a pressure drop before a storm. He looked up. A woman stood near the hallway entrance, a coffee cup in her hand, going nowhere. She was staring directly at him. Captain Diane Shepard did not move. She stood with her coffee cup at her side and her eyes locked on the man in the processing chair. Her brain was doing the thing it did when two pieces of information crashed into each other and refused to make sense. She had seen that face 12 times in the past 6 weeks. In the mayor's briefing packet. In the official press release she had helped draft. In the framed photograph that arrived from the mayor's office last Tuesday, still leaning against the wall in the lobby because nobody had gotten around to hanging it yet. She knew the exact set of those shoulders, the straight-back posture, the particular stillness of a man who was very good at waiting. The man sitting in handcuffs in her processing room was Marcus Elijah Bellamy, the new chief of police of Riverside. Diane set her coffee cup down on the nearest desk. She set it down with the careful, deliberate precision of someone who needed both hands free and needed to do something with the fury rising behind her eyes before she used it in the wrong direction. She crossed the room toward Brennan. He was at the desk, still filling out the citation, relaxed, satisfied. He looked up when her shadow fell across the paperwork and gave her the easy grin he gave everyone. "Morning. Diane, you catch the Kyle." Her voice was low and flat. "Step over here." Something in her tone pulled the grin sideways. He set his pen down and came around the side of the desk. "What's the problem?" Diane didn't answer right away. She looked at Marcus in the processing chair. Then she looked back at Brennan. When she spoke, she kept it quiet enough that only he could hear. "Do you know who that man is?" Brennan glanced over his shoulder. "Yeah, trespasser I picked up on Elmwood. Got a call from. That is Marcus Bellamy, Kyle." Brennan blinked. "Who?" Diane's jaw tightened. "The name doesn't ring a bell for you? At all? Should it?" "It absolutely should." She took one step closer. "He was appointed 4 weeks ago. The mayor held a press conference. There was a release sent to every supervisor in this building, including you." She paused. "He is the new chief of police." The silence that followed was 3 seconds long and felt like 3 minutes. Brennan stared at her. His mouth opened, closed. He turned and looked at Marcus again. Really looked this time. Marcus sat straight in the processing chair, wrists cuffed behind him, looking at the city seal on the wall like he had nowhere else to be. Brennan turned back to Diane. She watched it happen. The exact moment the full weight of what he'd done landed on him. The color drained from his face all at once. "That's no." He shook his head. "That can't be." "It is." He didn't say anything. Why would he have to? Diane's voice was still low, but there was something sharp underneath it now. "You had his ID. You had his deed confirmation. You put him in handcuffs in his own driveway and drove him here in the back of your unit. And you're standing here right now telling me he didn't say enough?" Brennan's mouth worked silently. "I got a call. Harold called it in. Said there was a—" "Stop talking." Diane said it quietly. Quietly enough that it cut right through him. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked to Marcus. Near the door, Janelle Carter hadn't moved. She'd watched every second of it. Brennan's confidence. Diane's approach. The words she couldn't fully hear, but could read completely in the way Brennan's face collapsed. Diane crouched slightly, reached behind Marcus, and unlocked the cuffs herself. The metal came free. She straightened and stepped back to give him room. Marcus rolled his wrists once, stood up from the chair. "Chief Bellamy," Diane said, clearly, not quietly. Clearly, so every person in that room heard it. "I am deeply sorry. This should never have happened." The title landed like a stone dropped into still water. "Chief Bellamy." Janelle's lips parted slightly. The desk officer's hands came off his keyboard. The buzz-cut officer near the window straightened in his chair. Marcus looked at Brennan. 3 seconds. That was all. But those 3 seconds covered a lot of ground. The driveway, the handcuffs, the smile, all of it. Brennan stood behind the desk with the unfinished citation in his hand and nothing left on his face. Marcus turned away from him. He straightened his jacket with one hand, extended the other to Diane. "Thank you, Captain," he said, even and measured, completely in control. "I'll see you Monday." He walked out. The door swung shut behind him. Nobody spoke. Brennan stood holding a trespassing citation with the name Marcus Elijah Bellamy typed at the top. Janelle looked at the door, then at Brennan, then at the floor. And made a decision she'd been building toward for 6 years. The parking lot was quiet. Marcus stood beside his truck with his keys in his hand and didn't get in. Not yet. He turned around and looked at the building behind him. The brick face of the Riverside Police Department. The flag out front hanging limp in the still morning air. He was still deciding what it meant when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. Janelle Carter was moving across the parking lot toward him. Out of uniform. She'd changed fast. jeans, a gray hoodie. Hair still pulled back the same way. She was walking with purpose, but her eyes were doing something complicated. Scared and certain at the same time, Marcus waited. She stopped a few feet away and looked at him without speaking. Up close, she looked younger than she had on the lawn, and more tired. "I need to show you something," she said. She held out her phone. Marcus took it. It was a group chat. The name at the top was something sports-related. Harmless looking. 24 members. The message history went back 5 weeks. He started reading. The first few messages were coded. Jokes that weren't quite jokes. References that needed context. Someone asking if the new management situation had been looked into. Someone else responding with a laughing emoji and a comment about how some people needed to learn how things worked before they started thinking they could change them. Then it got less coded. By the second week, they weren't bothering to disguise it much at all. There were comments about the appointment that made Marcus's jaw tighten. There was coordination. Who was working which shifts? Which routes? Which neighborhoods? There were names. There was a discussion about Harold Mitchell, a neighbor across the street. That was friendly and familiar, like talking about an old teammate. And then, near the top of the thread, sent at 7:14 that morning. Harold is ready. Blue House on Elmwood. New arrival expected 9 to 11 a.m. The name on it was Brennan single quotes. S. Marcus read it twice. Then he read it a third time, slowly, making sure he was seeing exactly what he was seeing. He handed the phone back to Janelle. "How long have you been on this force?" he asked. 6 years. He nodded once. 6 years is long enough to know the difference between a bad day and a bad department. He looked at her steadily. "Which is this?" Janelle looked down at her phone. Her thumb moved across the screen. When she looked back up, her expression had settled into something resolved. "I've known for a while," she said quietly. I didn't know what to do with it. You're doing it now." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the phone toward him. The chat opened. The screenshot function pulled up. She sent it. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. "Thank you," Marcus said. She nodded. She looked like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she just looked at him. This man who'd been in handcuffs in his own driveway 2 hours ago and was now standing in a parking lot, absorbing the fact that it had been planned. Whatever she saw in his face seemed to settle something in her. She turned and walked back toward the building. Marcus watched her go. Then he got in his truck. 4 days later, the suit was navy blue. Marcus had bought it in Atlanta 3 months ago, the same week he signed the papers on the Elmwood Avenue house. He'd stood in the fitting room and looked at himself in the mirror for a long time, not admiring it, just making sure it fit the way it needed to fit. He put it on Monday morning, knotted his tie in the mirror, checked his watch, left at 7:30. The swearing-in was held in the precinct's main conference room at 9 o'clock. Marcus had asked for small. No ceremony, no reception, no cameras except the local paper's photographer, who stood near the back wall and mostly stayed out of the way. Mayor Sandra Pierce was there in a navy blazer, her silver hair pinned back, her handshake firm and her eyes direct. Captain Diane Shepard stood to the left in full dress uniform, hands clasped in front of her. A handful of community members filled the chairs. A pastor Marcus didn't know yet. 2 business owners. A woman from the neighborhood association who had driven 50 minutes to be there. The room was plain. Folding chairs and a podium that wobbled slightly on the left side. Marcus stood straight at the front and raised his right hand and listened to the words of the oath. He had taken oaths before. He knew what they cost. He meant every word. When it was done and the mayor shook his hand and the small crowd applauded, Marcus stepped to the podium and spoke for 4 minutes without notes. He used the word accountability 5 times. He used restoration twice. He had considered the word change and set it aside deliberately. Change was a promise vague and easy to make. Restoration was a debt. It implied something had been taken. It implied he knew what it was and intended to return it. Several people in the room heard the difference. He could see it in their faces. He thanked them for coming. He kept it short. There was work to do. He walked into the precinct as chief of police of Riverside. At 9:52 in the morning, the building shifted when he entered. Not loudly. There was no commotion, no confrontation, just a change in the air. The way a room changes when someone walks in who everyone has been waiting for and nobody is ready to see. Conversations shortened. Movement slowed. Heads turned and then turned away and then turned back. Marcus walked through it without breaking stride. He cataloged everything, automatically, completely. The habit of 24 years. Who met his eye and held it? Who looked away first? Who smiled too wide, too fast? He noted the arrangement of desks and who sat where and what that said about the informal power running underneath the official structure. The file room door was slightly ajar. Someone had been in there this morning. He noted it. Kyle Brennan was standing near the far wall with 2 other officers, coffee cup in hand. When Marcus's eyes moved across him, Brennan smiled. Wide and confident and completely unbothered. The smile of a man who was not afraid, who had no intention of being afraid, who wanted Marcus to know it. Of everything in that room, that smile was the most concerning thing. Marcus kept walking. His office was at the end of the main corridor. His name was already on the door. He went in, sat down, opened the top desk drawer. The photograph was still there. He'd put it there Friday afternoon before the ceremony. Before any of it. A photograph he had carried for 26 years. Marcus at 21. Standing outside this building on a summer afternoon. Thin and young and looking at the camera with an expression that was trying to be harder than it was. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed the drawer. He pulled the personnel review request form from the top of the stack on his desk, uncapped his pen, and began to write. The files weren't there. Marcus had submitted the personnel review request Monday afternoon. Formal, properly rooted. Every box filled in correctly. By Tuesday morning. The records clerk, a heavy-set man named Kowalski, who spoke mostly in shrugs, told him the system was showing incomplete entries for the files he'd requested. Some kind of administrative backlog. He'd look into it. Wednesday? Marcus asked. Kowalski shrugged. Still working on it. Thursday, Marcus walked to the file room himself. He stood at the cabinet along the back wall and looked at the tabs. The case numbers were there. 4 formal complaints against Kyle Brennan. Logged and numbered and indexed in the system. The folders behind the tabs were empty. He stood there for a moment with an empty folder in his hand. Then he put it back, closed the drawer, and walked to his office. He was learning the shape of it. That was how corruption worked in his experience. It didn't announce itself. It revealed itself in layers, each one a little worse than the last, each one requiring you to adjust your understanding of how bad things actually were. You pulled on one thread, and 2 more appeared. You opened one drawer and found it empty, and understood that the emptiness wasn't an accident. Someone had removed those files. Not recently. The dust pattern inside the folders said they'd been gone for months. 4 complaints against Brennan. 4 case numbers leading nowhere. Whatever those complaints contained. Someone had decided a long time ago that they shouldn't be easy to find. Marcus wrote down the case numbers and locked the paper in his desk. Story broke Thursday evening. Marcus was still in his office when Diane knocked and came in without waiting, which told him, before she said a word, that it was something he needed to see immediately. She set her phone on his desk. ScreenUp.RiversideChronicleOnline.local news website. The kind that looked like journalism and operated like a message board for people with agendas. The headline was large and deliberately crafted. New police chief detained by own officers on day of arrival. Questions raised about vetting process. Marcus read it. Carefully. Completely. Noting not just what it said, but how it said it. The story opened with 3 paragraphs of vague concern about community uncertainty before naming him. It described the Friday morning incident as a confrontational situation that Marcus had created by arriving unannounced and without proper coordination with department staff. It quoted an unnamed source, described as a senior department official who expressed worry about the new chief's judgment and temperament. It did not quote Brennan by name. It did not mention handcuffs. It did not mention Hal Mitchell's phone call to dispatch. It had been carefully written to be almost impossible to directly refute without sounding defensive. Marcus set the phone down on the desk and was quiet for a moment. Who runs this publication? He asked. Former deputy mayor, Diane said. Name's Kavanaugh. He and the previous chief played golf together every other Sunday for 14 years. Marcus nodded slowly. How far has it traveled? Regional news aggregators picked it up this afternoon. There's a television station in Macon that ran a 30-second item on the evening news. He leaned back in his chair. The window behind him showed the parking lot going dark in the early evening. He thought about the empty file folders. He thought about Brennan's smile on Monday morning. He thought about the way this building had gone quiet when he walked in. Not the quiet of respect. The quiet of people waiting to see what happened next. They had been ready for him. That was the thing. Before he'd unpacked a single box. Before he'd sat down at his desk. Before he'd taken the oath. They had been ready. Friday afternoon. It got worse. 2 city council members, both of whom had served alongside the previous chief's administration for the better part of a decade, issued a joint statement calling for an emergency session to review Marcus's suitability for command. They cited the Riverside Chronicle story as evidence of what they called legitimate community concern. The session was formally scheduled for 2 weeks. Mayor Pierce called Marcus directly. Her voice was controlled, but tight around the edges. She said she was pushing back. She said she had his full support. She said the council session was political theater, and everyone knew it. Marcus thanked her and meant it. After he hung up, he sat for a long moment in the quiet of his office. Then he picked up the phone and called Diane. I need you to quietly find me an address, he said. Man named Curtis Webb. Owns a barber shop somewhere on Franklin Street. I know the name, Diane said carefully. Good, Marcus said. Don't use department resources to find it? A pause. Understood, she said. He hung up. Outside his window, Riverside settled into its Friday night. Somewhere out there, Kyle Brennan was still smiling. Not for much longer. The diner was called Rosie's. It sat on the corner of Route 12 and Ashford Street. A squat brick building with a neon sign and 5 pickup trucks in the parking lot at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early in his personal truck. Civilian clothes. He took a booth near the back where he could see both doors. He ordered coffee and waited. Curtis Webb arrived at 8 o'clock on the dot. He was a compact man, 53 years old. Close-cropped gray at his temples. The careful, measured movements of someone who had learned a long time ago not to take up more space than necessary. He wore a clean collared shirt. He scanned the diner when he walked in. Not casually, deliberately. The way you check a room when you've been taught by experience that rooms sometimes have consequences. He spotted Marcus. Something moved across his face. Recognition. Wariness. The particular calculation of a man deciding how much to trust a situation he didn't fully control yet. He came to the booth and sat down. They shook hands. Curtis ordered coffee. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I appreciate you coming," Marcus said. Curtis looked at him carefully. "Diane Shepard vouched for you," he said. "That's the only reason I'm here." He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "No offense, none taken." Curtis nodded slowly. He looked out the window at the parking lot, at the ordinary Saturday morning moving past outside. And when he looked back, his jaw was set. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me," Marcus said. "Start wherever you need to start." Curtis was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking. 9 months ago, on a Wednesday afternoon in January, Curtis was locking up the back entrance of his barber shop on Franklin Street when Brennan's cruiser pulled into the alley behind the building. Curtis had seen Brennan before. Everyone on Franklin Street had. But Brennan had never stopped specifically for him. That afternoon, Brennan got out of the car and told Curtis there had been complaints about the business. Noise complaints, parking issues, possible code violations that the city might need to look into. Curtis told him there were no complaints, that his barbershop had been operating on Franklin Street for 13 years without a single issue. Brennan smiled, that smile, and said that was a real shame, because complaints had a way of multiplying once the city started paying attention. Curtis asked him what he'd wanted. Brennan told him cash, monthly, an amount that wasn't small, but wasn't large enough to be catastrophic. The precise calculation of a man who understood how much a person could absorb before they stopped absorbing and started fighting back. In exchange, Brennan said, the business wouldn't have any problems. No complaints, no inspections, no incidents in the surrounding area that might affect foot traffic. Curtis told him no. 3 days later, his front window was broken. The week after that, a city inspector arrived unannounced and cited him for 4 violations that had never been mentioned in 13 years of prior inspections. The week after that, a patrol unit sat parked directly in front of his entrance for 7 hours on a Saturday. Prime business hours. Without explanation, Curtis started paying. He filed a formal complaint 9 months ago. The week after the first payment, he described everything. The alley conversation, the implied threats, the broken window. He gave the desk officer his name, his business address, a detailed written statement. He never heard anything back. 7 other businesses on Franklin, Curtis said. His voice was steady, but his hands had tightened around the mug. That I know of. Officer named Garrett does most of the collecting now. Shows up the last Friday of every month like it's a bill. He paused. I know 3 other owners who talked to you if they believed it would actually mean something this time. Marcus looked at him steadily. It will mean something this time. Curtis studied his face. The face of a man who'd been let down before. Studying the face of a man making a promise. Whatever he found there. It was enough. He reached into his shirt pocket and slid a phone across the table. That's a recording, he said quietly. Officer Garrett. Last month. Inside my shop. His jaw tightened. I started keeping records 7 months ago. After the complaint went nowhere. Marcus looked at the phone. He didn't touch it yet. You kept this for 7 months, he said. I kept it because I knew one day somebody was going to ask for it. Curtis looked out the window again. I just didn't know if that day was ever actually coming. Marcus picked up the phone. It's here, he said. 3 days later, the notice was in her locker at 7:30. Monday morning, a single sheet of paper. folded once. Her name typed on the front in the department's standard font. Janelle stood in the locker room and read it twice before she fully accepted what she was reading. Effective. Immediately. Officer J. Carter was being reassigned to overnight patrol. District 9. Report time. 11 o'clock. P.M. The signature at the bottom was Officer Garrett's. District 9 was 14 square miles of industrial lots and empty roads. On the far western edge of the city, overnight, alone. The kind of assignment you gave someone when you wanted them to understand something without having to say it out loud. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. By noon, she discovered the second part. She went to log into the internal communication system to check the shift briefing notes. Something she did every day. Had done every day for 6 years. Her credentials came back rejected. Access removed. She tried the case management portal. Same thing. The community liaison channel she'd been added to 4 weeks ago. The one Diane had personally approved gone. She was still in the building. Still in uniform. Still technically a functioning officer of the Riverside Police Department. She just couldn't do her job anymore. She sat at her desk for a long moment with her hands flat on the surface and her eyes forward and worked on keeping her breathing even around her. The precinct moved through its Monday morning. Routine. Phones. Paperwork. The low hum of a building that didn't know or didn't care what had just happened to her in the locker room. Or it knew exactly what had happened and had decided not to see it. She gathered her things and walked down the corridor to Marcus's office. She knocked twice and went in. Marcus was at his desk with a folder open in front of him. He looked up when she came in. He read her face the way she was beginning to understand. He read everything fast and completely. He closed the folder. Sit down, he said. She sat. She put the reassignment notice on his desk. Without saying anything, he picked it up. Read it. Set it back down. His expression didn't change. The system access, too. He asked, all of it. He nodded once. He was quiet for a moment. Not empty, but full. Like he was moving pieces around behind his eyes. This is clean, he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. On paper, it's a routine transfer. Nothing to formally reverse without giving them something to use. I know. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I've watched them do it to other people. Just never thought. She stopped. Never thought it would be you, Marcus said. She looked at the window. I've been careful for 6 years. Kept my head down. Documented nothing. Said nothing. Stayed invisible. She paused. Turns out that doesn't actually protect you. No, Marcus said quietly. It doesn't. The honesty of it landed without cruelty. That was the thing about him. He didn't soften things to make you feel better, but he didn't sharpen them to make you feel worse. He just said what was true and trusted you to handle it. Here's what I need you to do, he said. He leaned forward. Everything you've seen in 6 years on this force that didn't sit right. Write it down. All of it. Dates, names, incidents, anything you remember. Don't use department systems. Personal device. Personal email. Stored somewhere they can't reach. He held her gaze. Can you do that? Yes. Good. He sat back. You are not alone in this. I need you to hold on to that. She nodded. She believed him, not because she was naive. She'd lost the capacity for naive a long time ago in this building, but because she'd seen what he did with the group chat screenshot. He hadn't panicked. He hadn't deflected. He'd taken it and moved. She stood to leave. Janelle. She turned. What you did in that parking lot, he said. Showing me that chat. That took something. He paused. Don't let them make you forget that. That evening, Marcus and Diane worked past midnight at the conference table in his office. Curtis is recording the corroborating statements from 3 additional Franklin Street business owners, both contacted through Curtis, both frightened, both willing. The paper trail of the buried complaints, reconstructed from case numbers and partial records. The patrol log showing Officer Garrett's movements on collection Fridays, by 12:45. They had it laid out across the table like a map.